At Manor Farm, Mr. Jones had secured the hen houses for the night, but his intoxication caused him to forget to close the small openings. His lantern's light swayed erratically as he staggered across the yard, removed his boots by the back door, poured himself a final mug of beer from the scullery's barrel, and proceeded to his bedroom where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. The moment the bedroom light extinguished, a bustling and rustling commenced throughout the farm structures. Word had circulated during the day that old Major, the esteemed middle white boar, had experienced an unusual dream the previous night and wished to share it with the other animals. It had been decided that they would all assemble in the big barn as soon as Mr. Jones was safely out of the way. Old Major, as he was commonly known, despite his exhibition name being Willingdon Beauty, was so highly respected on the farm that every animal was willing to sacrifice an hour of sleep to hear what he had to convey. Positioned at one end of the large barn, on a slightly elevated platform, Major was already comfortably settled on a straw bed beneath a hanging lantern. He was 12 years old and had recently become quite portly, yet he retained a dignified appearance, possessing a wise and kind demeanor, even though his tusks had never been trimmed. Soon after, the other animals began to arrive and make themselves comfortable in their individual manners. First appeared were the 3 dogs, Bluebell, Jessie, and Pincher, followed by the pigs, who immediately settled in the straw directly in front of the platform. The hens perched on the window sills, the pigeons fluttered up to the rafters, and the sheep and cows reclined behind the pigs, commencing their rumination. The 2 cart horses, Boxer and Clover, entered together, moving very slowly and carefully placing their large, hairy hooves to avoid stepping on any small creature hidden in the straw. Clover, a robust and maternal mare approaching middle age, had never regained her previous physique after her 4th foaling. Boxer was an immense creature, nearly 18 hands tall, and as strong as any 2 ordinary horses combined. A white stripe on his nose gave him a somewhat unintelligent look, and indeed, he was not exceptionally clever. However, he was universally admired for his unwavering character and immense capacity for labor. Following the horses were Muriel, the white goat, and Benjamin the donkey. Benjamin was the oldest animal on the farm and possessed the worst temper. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was usually to utter a cynical remark. For example, he would state that God had given him a tail to swat flies, but he would rather have neither a tail nor flies. He was the only animal on the farm who never laughed, and if asked why, he would respond that he saw nothing amusing. Nevertheless, without openly acknowledging it, he was deeply devoted to Boxer. The 2 of them typically spent their Sundays together in the small paddock beyond the orchard, grazing side by side in silence. The 2 horses had just laid down when a group of ducklings, having lost their mother, filed into barn, cheeping faintly and scurrying about to find a spot where they wouldn't be trampled. Clover formed a protective barrier around them with her large foreleg, and the ducklings snuggled inside, promptly falling asleep. At the very last moment, Molly, the silly, attractive white mare who pulled Mr. Jones's trap, pranced delicately in, chewing on a sugar cube. She positioned herself near the front and began tossing her white mane, hoping to attract attention to the red ribbons braided into it. Finally, the cat arrived, as usual, searching for the warmest spot, and eventually squeezed herself between Boxer and Clover. There, she purred contentedly throughout Major's address, without listening to a single word he uttered. All the animals were now present, except for Moses, the domesticated raven, who slept on a perch behind the back door. When Major observed that they had all made themselves comfortable and were waiting attentively, he cleared his throat and began, "Comrades, you have already heard about the peculiar dream I experienced last night, but I will discuss the dream later. I have something else to convey first. I do not believe, comrades, that I will remain with you for many more months. And before I depart, I feel it is my duty to impart to you the wisdom I have acquired. I have lived a long life. I had ample time for contemplation as I lay alone in my stall, and I believe I can assert that I comprehend the essence of life on this earth as thoroughly as any animal presently living. It is about this that I wish to speak to you now. Comrades, what is the nature of our existence? Let us confront it. Our lives are wretched, laborious, and brief. We are born. We are provided with just enough sustenance to sustain our breathing, and those of us capable are compelled to work until the very last ounce of our strength. The very instant our utility ceases, we are cruelly slaughtered. No animal in England comprehends happiness or leisure after reaching 1 year of age. No animal in England is truly free. The existence of an animal is one of misery and servitude. That is the unvarnished truth. But is this merely a part of the natural order? Is it because our land is so impoverished that it cannot afford a decent life to its inhabitants? No, comrades, 1,000 times no. The soil of England is fertile. Its climate is favorable. It is capable of providing food in abundance to an immensely greater number of animals than currently reside upon it. This single farm of ours could sustain 12 horses, 20 cows, hundreds of sheep, and all of them living in a comfort and dignity that are now almost beyond our comprehension. Why then do we persist in this deplorable state? Because nearly the entire output of our labor is stolen from us by human beings. There, comrades, lies the solution to all our predicaments. It is encapsulated in a single word. Man is the sole genuine adversary we possess. Eliminate man from the scene, and the fundamental causes of hunger and overwork are eradicated forever. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not yield milk. He does not lay eggs. He is too feeble to pull the plow. He cannot run swiftly enough to capture rabbits. Yet, he is the master of all animals. He compels them to toil, and he returns to them the bare minimum necessary to prevent their starvation, keeping the remainder for himself. Our labor cultivates the soil. Our waste fertilizes it. Yet not one of us possesses anything more than the skin on our backs. You cows that I observe before me, how many thousands of gallons of milk have you provided during this past year? And what has become of that milk, which should have been used to rear strong calves? Every single drop has descended into the throats of our adversaries. And you hens, how many eggs have you laid in this last year? And how many of those eggs ever hatched into chickens? The rest have all been sent to market to generate income for Jones and his associates. And you, Clover, where are those 4 foals you bore, who should have been the support and joy of your old age? Each was sold at 1 year old. You will never behold any of them again. In recompense for your 4 confinements and all your exertion in the fields, what have you ever received except your meager rations and a stall? And even the wretched lives we lead are not permitted to reach their natural duration. As for myself, I do not complain, for I am one of the fortunate ones. I am 12 years old, and have produced over 400 offspring, such as a natural lifespan of a pig. But no animal ultimately evades the cruel blade. You young pigs seated before me, every one of you will meet your demise screaming at the slaughter block within a year. To that dreadful end we all must come, cows, pigs, hens, sheep, everyone. Even the horses and dogs face no superior destiny. You, boxer, the very day your great muscles lose their power, Jones will sell you to the knacker, who will slit your throat and render you down for the foxhounds. As for the dogs, when they grow old and toothless, Jones fastens a brick around their necks and drowns them in the nearest pond. Is it not perfectly clear, then, comrades, that all the misfortunes of our existence stem from the tyranny of human beings? Only eliminate man, and the fruits of our labor would become our own. Almost instantaneously, we could become wealthy and free. What then must we do? We must strive day and night, body and soul, for the overthrow of the human race. That is my declaration to you. Comrades, rebellion. I do not know when that rebellion will occur. It might be in a week or a century. But I know, as certain as I perceive the straw beneath my feet, that sooner or later, justice will prevail. Focus your attention on that, comrades, throughout the brief remainder of your lives, and above all, transmit this message of mine to those who succeed you, so that future generations will continue the struggle until it is victorious. And remember, comrades, your resolve must never waver. No argument must lead you astray. Never heed those who tell you that man and animals share a common interest, that the prosperity of one signifies the prosperity of the others. It is all falsehoods. Man serves only his own interests, and among us animals, let there be perfect unity, perfect camaraderie in the struggle. All men are adversaries. All animals are comrades. At this moment, a tremendous clamor erupted. While Major was speaking, For large rats had stealthily emerged from their hiding places and were sitting on their hindquarters, listening to him. The dogs had suddenly spotted them, and only by a swift dash to their holes did the rats escape with their lives. Major raised his trotters to command silence. "Comrades," he declared, "here is a matter that requires resolution. Are the wild creatures, such as rats and rabbits, our companions or our foes? Let us put it to a vote. I propose this question to the assembly. Are rats comrades?" The vote was taken immediately, and it was decided by an overwhelming majority that rats were comrades. There were only 4 dissenting votes. The 3 dogs and a cat, who was later discovered to have voted on both sides. Major continued, "I have little else to add. I merely reiterate. Always remember your obligation of hostility towards man and all his customs. Whatever walks on 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever walks on 4 legs or has wings is a friend. And also remember that in opposing man, we must not become like him, even after you have triumphed over him. Do not adopt his vices. No animal must ever reside in a house, or sleep in a bed, or wear clothing, or consume alcohol, or smoke tobacco, or handle money, or engage in commerce. All human habits are evil. And above all, no animal must ever dominate its own kind. Whether weak or strong, clever or simple, we are all siblings. No animal must ever take the life of another animal. All animals are equal. And now, comrades, I will recount my dream from last night. I cannot describe that dream to you. It was a vision of the earth as it will be once man has vanished. But it brought back to mind something I had long forgotten. Many years ago, when I was a young pig, my mother and the other sows would sing an ancient song of which they only knew the melody and the initial 3 words. I had known that tune in my infancy, but it had long since faded from my memory. Last night, however, it returned to me in my dream, and furthermore, the lyrics of the song also resurfaced. Words, "I am certain," which were sung by the animals of long ago and have been forgotten for generations. I will sing that song to you now. Comrades, I am old, and my voice is hoarse, but once I've taught you the melody, you can sing it better yourselves. It is titled Beasts of England. Old Major cleared his throat and began to sing. As he had mentioned, his voice was hoarse, but he sang well enough, and it was a stirring tune, somewhat between Clementine and La Cucaracha. The lyrics were, "Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and climate, listen to my joyous news of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming. Tyrant man shall be overthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. Rings shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our backs. Bit and spur shall rust forever. Cruel whips no more shall crack. Riches more than mine can fathom. Wheat and barley, oats and hay, clover, beans, and mango wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Bright will shine the fields of England. Purer shall its waters be. Sweeter yet shall blow its breezes on a day that sets us free. For that day we all must labor, though we die before it breaks. Cows and horses, geese and turkeys, all must toil for freedom's sake. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and climate, listen well and spread my tidings of the golden future time." The singing of this song stirred the animals into profound excitement. Almost before Major had finished, they had begun singing it themselves. Even the least intelligent among them had already grasped the tune and a few of the words, and as for the clever ones, such as the pigs and dogs, they had memorized the entire song within minutes. Then, after a few initial attempts, the entire farm erupted into Beasts of England in magnificent unison. The cows mooed it, the dogs howled it, the sheep bleated it, the horses neighed it, and the ducks quacked it. They were so delighted with the song that they sang it straight through 5 times consecutively, and might have continued singing all night had they not been interrupted. Unfortunately, the commotion awakened Mr. Jones, who sprang out of bed, convinced that a fox was in the yard. He seized a gun that always stood in a corner of his bedroom, and fired a charge of number 6 shot into the darkness. The pellets embedded themselves in the barn wall, and the meeting quickly dispersed. Everyone fled to their sleeping places. The birds flew onto their perches, the animals settled down in the straw, and the entire farm was asleep in an instant. Chapter 2. 3 nights later, old Major passed away peacefully in his sleep. His remains were interred at the foot of the orchard in early March. Over the ensuing 3 months, considerable clandestine activity took place. Major's speech had profoundly influenced the more intelligent animals on the farm, granting them a completely fresh perspective on existence. They were uncertain when the rebellion Major had prophesied would occur, and they had no cause to believe it would happen within their own lifetimes. Yet they clearly understood it was their duty to prepare for it. The responsibility of instructing and organizing the other animals naturally fell upon the pigs, who were universally acknowledged as the most astute among the creatures. Preeminent among the pigs were 2 young boars, Snowball and Napoleon, whom Mr. Jones had been raising for commercial purposes. Napoleon was a large, rather intimidating-looking Berkshire boar, the sole Berkshire on the farm, not particularly loquacious, but known for always getting his way. Snowball was a more animated pig than Napoleon, quicker in speech and more innovative, though he was not considered to possess the same depth of character. All the other male pigs on the farm were porkers, with the most recognizable being a small, plump pig named Squealer, characterized by his very round cheeks, twinkling eyes, agile movements, and a piercing voice. He was an exceptionally gifted speaker, and when he argued a complex point, he had a tendency to skip from side to side and twitch his tail, which was remarkably persuasive. The others remarked that Squealer could make black appear white. These 3 had refined old Major's doctrines into a comprehensive philosophical system, which they named animalism. Several nights each week, after Mr. Jones had fallen asleep, they convened secret meetings in the barn and expounded the tenets of animalism to the other animals. Initially, they encountered considerable obtuseness and indifference. Some animals spoke of their obligation of loyalty to Mr. Jones, whom they referred to as Master, or made simplistic statements such as, "Mr. Jones feeds us. If he were gone, we would starve to death." Others posed questions like, "Why should we concern ourselves with what happens after we die?" Or, "If this rebellion is destined to occur regardless, what difference does our effort make?" The pigs found it exceedingly difficult to convince them that such sentiments ran contrary to the spirit of animalism. The most foolish inquiries of all came from Molly, the white mare. Her very first question to Snowball was, "Will there still be sugar after the rebellion?" "No," Snowball replied firmly. "We have no means of producing sugar on this farm. Besides, you do not require sugar. You'll have all the oats and hay you desire." "And will I still be permitted to wear ribbons in my mane?" Molly inquired. "Comrade," Snowball stated, "those ribbons to which you are so attached are the insignia of servitude. Can you not comprehend that liberty is worth more than ribbons?" Molly acquiesced, but she did not sound entirely persuaded. The pigs faced an even greater challenge in refuting the falsehoods propagated by Moses, the domesticated raven. Moses, who was Mr. Jones's favorite pet, served as a spy and a tattletale, but he was also an eloquent speaker. He claimed to be aware of a mystical realm called Sugar Candy Mountain, where all animals ascended after death. Moses asserted that Sugar Candy Mountain was situated somewhere in the sky, a short distance beyond the clouds, and that it was Sundays 7 days a week. Clover was perpetually in season, and lump sugar and linseed cake grew on the hedges. The animals disliked Moses due to his tale-bearing and idleness, yet some of them believed in Sugar Candy Mountain, and the pigs had to argue strenuously to convince them that no such place existed. Their most devoted adherents were the 2 cart horses, Boxer and Clover. These 2 struggled considerably with independent thought, but once they had accepted the pigs as their mentors, they assimilated everything they were told and disseminated it to the other animals through straightforward arguments. They were unfailingly present at the clandestine barn meetings and led the singing of Beasts of England, which always concluded the gatherings. As events transpired, the rebellion was achieved much sooner and with greater ease than anyone had anticipated. In previous years, Mr. Jones, though a demanding master, had been a proficient farmer. However, recently he had fallen on hard times. He had become profoundly discouraged after incurring financial losses in a lawsuit and had indulged in excessive drinking. For entire days, he would recline in his Windsor chair in the kitchen, perusing newspapers, consuming alcohol, and occasionally offering Moses crusts of bread soaked in beer. His farm hands were lazy and dishonest. The fields were overrun with weeds. The buildings required roof repairs. The hedges were neglected, and the animals were underfed. June arrived, and the hay was nearly ready for harvesting. On Midsummer's Eve, a Saturday, Mr. Jones traveled to Willingdon and became so intoxicated at the Red Lion that he did not return until midday on Sunday. The farmhands had milked the cows early in the morning and then departed to hunt rabbits, neglecting to feed the animals. Upon his return, Mr. Jones immediately fell asleep on the drawing-room sofa with a newspaper, News of the World, covering his face, so that by evening the animals remained unfed. Finally, their patience wore thin. One of the cows forced open the store shed door with her horn, and all the animals began to help themselves from the bins. It was precisely then that Mr. Jones awoke. The next moment, he and his 4 farmhands entered the store shed, whips in hand, lashing out in all directions. This was more than the famished animals could endure. With a sudden, unplanned unity, they threw themselves upon their tormentors. Jones and his men unexpectedly found themselves being headbutted and kicked from all sides. The situation was completely beyond their control. They had never witnessed animals behaving in such a manner before, and this abrupt revolt by creatures they were accustomed to beating and abusing as they pleased terrified them almost to the point of losing their minds. After only a moment or two, they abandoned their attempts to defend themselves and fled. A minute later, all 5 of them were in full retreat down the cart track leading to the main road, with the animals pursuing them triumphantly. Mrs. Jones peered out of the bedroom window, observed what was happening, hastily tossed a few belongings into a carpet bag, and discreetly exited the farm by another route. Moses leaped from his perch and flapped after her, croaking loudly. Meanwhile, the animals had chased Jones and his men onto the road and slammed the 5-bar gate shut behind them. And so, almost before they comprehended what was transpiring, the rebellion had been successfully executed. Jones was expelled, and Manor Farm belonged to them. For the initial few minutes, the animals could scarcely believe their good fortune. Their first action was to gallop together around the farm's boundaries, as if to ensure no human was concealed anywhere on it. Then they raced back to the farm buildings to eradicate the last vestiges of Jones's hated regime. The harness room at the end of the stables was forced open. The bits, nose rings, dog chains, and the cruel knives Mr. Jones had used to castrate pigs and lambs were all thrown down the well. The reins, halters, blinkers, and degrading nose bags were cast onto the rubbish fire burning the yard, as were the whips. All the animals capered with joy as they watched the whips consumed by flames. Snowball also tossed onto the fire the ribbons with which the horses' manes and tails had typically been adorned on market days. Ribbons, he declared, should be regarded as clothing, which is a mark of human being. All animals should remain unclothed. When Boxer heard this, he retrieved the small straw hat he wore in summer to keep flies out his ears and flung it onto the fire with the rest. In a very short time, the animals had destroyed everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones. Napoleon then led them back to the store shed and distributed a double portion of corn to every animal, along with 2 biscuits for each dog. Afterward, they sang Beasts of England from beginning to end 7 times consecutively, and then settled down for the night, sleeping as they had never slept before. However, they awoke at dawn as usual, and suddenly recalling the glorious event that had transpired, they all rushed out into the pasture together. A short distance down the pasture, there was a small hill that offered a view of most of the farm. The animals hurried to its summit and gazed around them in the clear morning light. Yes, it was theirs. Everything they could see belonged to them. In the ecstasy of that realization, they gamboled around and around, leaping into the air with great bursts of excitement. They rolled in the dew, cropped mouthfuls of the sweet summer grass, kicked up clouds of black earth, and inhaled its rich scent. Then they undertook a tour of inspection of the entire farm and surveyed with speechless admiration the plowland, the hayfield, the orchard, the pond, and the spinney. It was as if they had never seen these things before, and even now, they could hardly believe that it was all their own. Then they filed back to the farm buildings and paused in silence outside the farmhouse door. That, too, was theirs, but they were afraid to enter. After a moment, however, Snowball and Napoleon forced the door open with their shoulders, and the animals entered in single file, treading with extreme caution for fear of disturbing anything. They tiptoed from room to room, hesitant to speak above a whisper, and gazed with a sense of awe at the incredible luxury. The beds with their feather mattresses, the mirrors, the horsehair sofa, the Brussels carpet, and a lithograph of Queen Victoria above the drawing room mantelpiece. They were just ascending the stairs when Molly was discovered to be missing, returning. The others found that she had remained behind in the best bedroom. She had taken a piece of blue ribbon from Mrs. Jones's dressing table and was holding it against her shoulder, foolishly admiring herself in the mirror. The others sharply reproached her, and they went outside. Some hams hanging in the kitchen were removed for burial, and the barrel of beer in the scullery was smashed with a kick from Boxer's hoof. Otherwise, nothing in the house was disturbed. A unanimous resolution was immediately passed that the farmhouse should be preserved as a museum. All agreed that no animal should ever live there. The animals ate their breakfast, and then Snowball and Napoleon summoned them again. "Comrades," Snowball announced, "it is 6:30, and we have a long day ahead. Today we begin the hay harvest, but there's another matter that must be addressed first." The pigs then revealed that during the past 3 months, they had taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book that had belonged to Mr. Jones's children and had been discarded on the rubbish heap. Napoleon sent for pots of black and white paint and led the way down to the 5-bar gate that opened onto the main road. Then Snowball, being the most skilled at writing, took a brush between the 2 knuckles of his trotter, painted over Manor Farm on the top bar of the gate, and in its place, painted Animal Farm. This was to be the farm's name from that point onward. Afterward, they returned to the farm buildings where Snowball and Napoleon requested a ladder, which they had placed against the end wall of the big barn. They explained that through their studies over the past 3 months, the pigs had successfully condensed the principles of animalism into 7 commandments. These 7 commandments would now be inscribed on a wall. They would constitute an unalterable law, by which all the animals on Animal Farm must live forevermore. With some difficulty, as it is not easy for a pig to maintain balance on a ladder, Snowball climbed up and began working, with Squealer a few rungs below him holding the paint pot. The commandments were written on the wall in large white letters, visible from 30 yards away. They read as follows: the 7 commandments. 1. Whatever walks on 2 legs is an enemy. 2. Whatever walks on 4 legs or has wings is a friend. 3. No animal shall wear clothes. 4. No animal shall sleep in a bed. 5. No animal shall drink alcohol. 6. No animal shall kill any other animal. 7. All animals are equal. It was very neatly written, and except that friend was spelled frind, and one of the S's was reversed, the spelling was correct throughout. Snowball read it aloud for the benefit of the others. All the animals nodded in complete agreement, and the clever ones immediately began to commit the commandments to memory. "Now, comrades," exclaimed Snowball, tossing down the paintbrush, "to the hayfield. Let us make it a point of honor to gather the harvest more swiftly than Jones and his men could." But at this moment, the 3 cows, who had seemed restless for some time, let out a loud bellow. They had not been milked for 24 hours, and their udders were almost painfully full. After a brief consideration, the pigs sent for buckets and milked the cows quite successfully, their trotters being well suited for this task. Soon, there were 5 buckets of frothing, creamy milk, which many of the animals regarded with considerable interest. "What is going to happen to all that milk?" someone asked. "Jones used sometimes to mix some of it in our mash," said one of the hens. "Never mind the milk, comrades," cried Napoleon, positioning himself in front of the buckets. "That will be dealt with. The harvest is more important. Comrade Snowball will lead the way. I shall follow in a few minutes. Forward, comrades. The hay is waiting." So the animals marched down to the hayfield to begin the harvest, and when they returned in the evening, it was observed that the milk had vanished. Chapter 3. They toiled and sweated intensely to bring in the hay, but their efforts were handsomely repaid, for the harvest proved to be an even greater triumph than they had anticipated. At times, the labor was arduous. The tools had been designed for human use, not for animals, and it was a significant impediment that no animal was capable of using any instrument that required standing on its hind legs. However, the pigs were so ingenious that they could devise a solution for every obstacle. As for the horses, they were intimately familiar with every inch of the field and, in fact, understood the processes of mowing and raking far better than Jones and his farmhands ever had. The pigs did not actively participate in the physical labor, but directed and supervised the others, leveraging their superior intellect. It was only natural that they should assume leadership. Boxer and Clover would harness themselves to the cutter or the horse rake. No bits or reins were, of course, necessary in those days, and steadily circle the field, with a pig walking behind and calling out, "Gee up, comrade," or "Whoa, back, comrade," as the situation demanded. Every animal, from the most humble, contributed to turning and gathering the hay. Even the ducks and hens diligently worked back and forth all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. Ultimately, they completed the harvest in 2 fewer days than it had typically taken Jones and his men. Furthermore, it was the largest harvest a farm had ever seen. There was absolutely no waste. The hens and ducks, with their keen eyesight, had gathered every last stalk, and not a single animal on the farm had purloined even a mouthful. Throughout that summer, the farm operations proceeded with perfect efficiency. The animals were happier than they had ever imagined possible. Every morsel of food brought intense, genuine pleasure now that it was truly their own sustenance, produced by themselves and for themselves, not grudgingly dispensed by a master. With the useless, parasitic human beings gone, there was more for everyone to consume. There was also more leisure time. Despite their inexperience, the animals encountered numerous difficulties. For instance, later in the year, when they harvested corn, they had to thresh it in the ancient manner and winnow the chaff with their breath, as the farm lacked a threshing machine. But the pigs, with their intelligence, and Boxer, with his immense strength, consistently helped them overcome challenges. Boxer was admired by all. He had been a diligent worker even during Jones's era, but now he seemed equivalent to 3 horses. There were days when the entire farm's labor appeared to rest on his mighty shoulders. From morning until night, he was constantly pushing and pulling, always at the most demanding location. He had arranged one of the cockerels to awaken him half an hour earlier than anyone else in the mornings, and he would contribute some voluntary labor wherever it seemed most needed before the regular workday commenced. His response to every problem, every setback, was, "I will work harder," which he had adopted as his personal motto. However, everyone worked according to their capacity. The hens and ducks, for example, salvaged 5 bushels of corn during the harvest by collecting the scattered grains. Nobody stole, nobody complained about their rations. The quarrels, biting, and jealousy that had been customary aspects of life in the past had almost vanished. Nobody shirked, or almost nobody. Molly, it was true, was not adept at rising early in the mornings and had a habit of leaving work prematurely, citing a stone in her hoof. And the cat's behavior was somewhat peculiar. It was soon noticed that whenever work needed to be done, the cat could never be found. She would disappear for hours and then reappear at meal times or in the evening after work was concluded, as if nothing had happened. Yet, she always offered such excellent excuses and purred so affectionately that it was impossible not to believe in her good intentions. Old Benjamin, the donkey, seemed completely unchanged since the rebellion. He performed his work in the same slow, stubborn manner as he had during Jones's time, neither shirking nor volunteering for additional tasks. Regarding the rebellion and its consequences, he would express no opinion. When asked if he was not happier now that Jones was gone, he would only say, "Donkeys live a long time. None of you has ever seen a dead donkey," and the others had to be content with this cryptic reply. On Sundays, there was no work. Breakfast was served an hour later than usual, and after breakfast, a ceremony was observed weekly without fail. First came the hoisting of the flag. Snowball had discovered an old green tablecloth belonging to Mrs. Jones in the harness room, and had painted a hoof and a horn in white upon it. This flag was raised on the flagpole in the farmhouse garden every Sunday morning. The flag was green, Snowball explained, to symbolize the green field of England, while the hoof and horn represented the future republic of the animals that would emerge once the human race had been finally overthrown. Following the flag hoisting, all the animals marched into the large barn for a general assembly, known as the meeting. Here, the work for the upcoming week was planned, and resolutions were put forward and debated. It was invariably the pigs who proposed the resolutions. The other animals understood how to vote, but could never conceive of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the discussions, but it was noted that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be relied upon to oppose it, even when it was decided, a matter no one could object to in itself, to designate the small paddock behind the orchard as a retirement home for animals past work. There was a heated debate concerning the appropriate retirement age for each class of animal. The meeting always concluded with the singing of Beasts of England, and the afternoon was dedicated to recreation. The pigs had designated the harness room as their headquarters. Here, in the evenings, they studied blacksmithing, carpentry, and other essential trades from books they had retrieved from the farmhouse. Snowball also busied himself with organizing the other animals into what he termed animal committees. He was tireless in this endeavor. He established the Egg Production Committee for the hens, the Clean Tails League for the cows, the Wild Comrades Re-Education Committee, whose purpose was to domesticate the rats and rabbits, the Whiter Wool Movement for the sheep, and various others, in addition to initiating classes in reading and writing. On the whole, these initiatives proved unsuccessful. The attempt to tame the wild creatures, for example, failed almost immediately. They continued to behave much as before, and when treated with generosity, they simply exploited it. The cat joined the Re-Education Committee and was very active in it for several days. She was observed one day sitting on a roof and speaking to some sparrows who were just out of her reach. She was telling them that all animals were now comrades, and that any sparrow who wished could come and perch on her paw, but the sparrows maintained their distance. The reading and writing classes, however, were a great triumph. By autumn, almost every animal on the farm had achieved some degree of literacy. As for the pigs, they could already read and write perfectly. The dogs learned to read fairly well, but showed no interest in reading anything except the 7 Commandments. Muriel the goat could read somewhat better than the dogs, and sometimes read to the others in the evenings from scraps of newspaper she discovered on the rubbish heap. Benjamin could read as well as any pig, but never exercised his ability. As far as he knew, he stated, there was nothing worth reading. Clover learned the entire alphabet, but could not combine words. Boxer could not progress beyond the letter D. He would meticulously trace out A, B, C, D in the dust with his large hoof, and then stare at the letters with his ears back, sometimes shaking his forelock, try with all his might to recall what came next, and never succeeding. On several occasions he did learn E, F, G, H, but by the time he knew them, it was invariably discovered that he had forgotten A, B, C, and D. Finally, he decided to be content with the first 4 letters and would write them out once or twice each day to refresh his memory. Molly refused to learn any letters except the 6 that spelled her own name. She would form these very neatly from pieces of twig and then adorn them with a flower or 2, walking around them admiringly. None of the other animals on the farm could get further than the letter A. It was also observed that the less intelligent animals, such as the sheep, hens, and ducks, were unable to learn the 7 Commandments by heart. After much deliberation, Snowball declared that the 7 Commandments could, in essence, be condensed into a single maxim. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. This, he asserted, encapsulated the fundamental principle of animalism. Whoever had fully comprehended it would be safe from human influences. The birds initially objected, as it seemed to them that they too possessed 2 legs, but Snowball demonstrated to them that this was not the case. A bird's wing, comrades, he explained, is an organ propulsion and not a manipulation. It should therefore be considered a leg. The distinguishing characteristic of man is the hand, the instrument with which he perpetrates all his mischief. The birds did not grasp Snowball's elaborate vocabulary, but they accepted his explanation, and all the humbler animals set about learning the new maxim by rote. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad was inscribed on the end wall of the barn, above the 7 Commandments and in larger letters. Once they had committed it to memory, the sheep developed a strong affection for this maxim, and often, as they lay in the field, they would all begin bleating, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and continue for hours without tiring. Napoleon showed no interest in Snowball's committees. He asserted that the education of the young was more vital than anything that could be accomplished for those who were already mature. It so happened that Jessie and Bluebell had both given birth shortly after the hay harvest, between them producing 9 robust puppies. As soon as they were weaned, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, stating that he would assume responsibility for their upbringing. He brought them up into a loft accessible only by a ladder from the high room, and there kept them in such isolation that the rest of the farm soon forgot their existence. The mystery of the milk's disappearance was quickly clarified. It was incorporated into the pigs' mash every day. The early apples were now ripening, and the orchard grass was strewn with fallen fruit. The animals had naturally assumed that these would be distributed equally. One day, however, the directive was issued that all windfalls were to be collected and transported to the harness room for the pigs' consumption. At this, some of the other animals murmured, but it was futile. All the pigs were in complete agreement on this matter, even Snowball and Napoleon. Squealer was dispatched to provide the necessary explanations to the others. "Comrades," he exclaimed, "you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are acting out of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole purpose in consuming these items is to maintain our health. Milk and apples, comrades, have been scientifically proven to contain substances absolutely essential for a pig's well-being. We pigs are intellectual laborers. The entire administration and organization of this farm depend on us. Day and night, we are safeguarding your welfare. It is for your sake that we consume that milk and those apples. Do you comprehend what would transpire if we pigs failed in our duty?" Jones would return. "Yes, Jones would certainly return, comrades," cried Squealer, almost imploringly, skipping from side to side and flicking his tail. "Surely there is no one among you who desires to see Jones's return?" If there was one thing the animals were absolutely convinced of, it was that they did not want Jones back. When the matter was presented in this light, they had nothing further to say. The importance of maintaining the pigs' good health was unequivocally clear. So it was agreed without further argument that the milk and the fallen apples, as well as the main apple crop when it ripened, should be exclusively reserved for the pigs. Chapter 4. By late summer, intelligence of the events at Animal Farm had disseminated throughout half the county. Daily, Snowball and Napoleon dispatched flocks of pigeons with instructions to intermingle with animals on adjacent farms, relate the tale of the rebellion, and impart the melody of beasts of England. During most of this period, Mr. Jones had been ensconced in the taproom of the Red Lion at Willingdon, bemoaning to anyone who would listen to monstrous injustice he had endured, having been evicted from his property by a rabble of worthless animals. The other farmers, while sympathetic in principle, initially offered him scant assistance. Covertly, each of them pondered whether they could somehow exploit Jones's misfortune to their own advantage. It was fortunate that the proprietors of the 2 farms bordering Animal Farm were perpetually at odds. One of these, named Foxwood, was a sprawling, neglected, antiquated farm, largely overgrown with woodland, its pastures depleted and its hedges in a deplorable state. Its owner, Mr. Pilkington, was an indolent gentleman farmer who largely spent his time fishing or hunting, depending on the season. The other farm, known as Pinchfield, was smaller and better maintained. Its owner was Mr. Frederick, a harsh, astute individual constantly embroiled in legal disputes and bearing a reputation for driving hard bargains. These 2 farmers loathed each other so intensely that it was difficult for them to reach any agreement, even when it was for their mutual benefit. For the initial period, they merely feigned sympathy for Mr. Jones, simultaneously attempting to derive advantage from his predicament. They claimed that the animals on Animal Farm would swiftly starve to death, or alternatively, that infighting would erupt among them and they would succumb to their own savagery. Having become accustomed to calling the farm Manor Farm, they found it peculiar to refer to it as Animal Farm, and they made an effort, particularly Mr. Frederick and Mr. Pilkington, to consistently use the old name. They spread reports about Animal Farm that were entirely false. They stated that the animals on the farm engaged in cannibalism and shared their females, and that such practices arose from the effect of consuming alcohol. When these rumors failed to gain traction, they began to circulate stories of a different kind. They claimed that an extraordinary pig named Snowball was the one who had brought about the rebellion, asserting that he was a brilliant military strategist. All animals on the farm, including those in the wild, were encouraged to rebel, It was in early October, when the harvest was complete and much of the corn had been collected, that the expected attack by humans occurred. Mr. Jones, along with all his men and half a dozen men from Foxwood and Pinchfield, arrived at the farm gate. They were armed with sticks, and Mr. Jones also carried a gun, which he discharged into the air as they approached. The humans, driven by their fear of similar rebellions on their own farms, intended to reclaim Animal Farm and subjugate the animals. They were met by Snowball and Napoleon, who had prepared for this very scenario. Snowball, who had studied an old book about Julius Caesar's campaigns found in the farmhouse, devised a strategy for their defense. He positioned the smaller animals, like the ducks and geese, in front, while the larger animals, such as the cows and horses, were held back as a second line of defense. The humans, confident of their victory, advanced into the farmyard. The animals, however, had a surprise in store for them. Snowball gave the signal, and the ducks and geese charged forward, pecking and flapping at the men's legs. This caught the men off guard, and they retaliated with their sticks. Snowball, leading the charge, then initiated the second phase of the attack. The cows and horses, driven by the pigs, rushed forward, butting and kicking the men. The battle was chaotic, and the men, overwhelmed by the unexpected ferocity of the animals, began to retreat. Mr. Jones, in a desperate attempt, fired his gun, wounding Snowball and killing his sheep. This act of violence only fueled the animal's determination. Boxer, with his immense strength, knocked out one of Mr. Frederick's men with a powerful kick. The man lay motionless, and Boxer, horrified, believed he had killed him. Snowball, however, assured him that it was a just act of war. The humans, in disarray, fled the farm. The animals pursued them to the main road, ensuring their complete expulsion. They returned to the farm, exhilarated by their victory. Snowball declared the day a triumph and named it the Battle of the Cowshed, in honor of the pig's strategic maneuvers near the cowshed during the fight. A medal for bravery, Animal Hero, First Class, was created and awarded to Snowball and Boxer. The dead sheep was also honored posthumously. The animals then celebrated their success, recognizing that they had not only defended their farm, but also solidified their independence. The gun Mr. Jones had used was found and placed at the foot of the flagpole to be fired twice a year, on the anniversary of the rebellion and on the anniversary of the Battle of Cowshed. Chapter 5. Molly became increasingly troublesome. She was frequently late for work and offered flimsy excuses, such as a stone in her hoof, though she always consumed her meals with enthusiasm. She was often seen admiring herself in the looking-glass in Mrs. Jones's bedroom, adorned with ribbons from Mrs. Jones's dressing table. Clover, one day, observed Molly standing near the boundary hedge, conversing with a man from the neighboring farm, who was stroking her nose. Clover was disturbed by this and confronted Molly, asking if she had allowed the man to stroke her nose and if she had accepted ribbons from him. Molly vehemently denied it, but Clover noticed sugar lumps hidden beneath the straw in Molly's stall, and a bundle of ribbons concealed among them. 3 days later, Molly vanished. For several weeks, the animals knew nothing of her whereabouts until some pigeons reported seeing her on the other side of Willingdon, harnessed to a smart trap and being driven by a man with a red face. She wore a scarlet ribbon in her forelock and was being fed sugar. None of the animals ever mentioned Molly again. The winter proved to be quite harsh. The animals dedicated significant time to planning the upcoming season's work, which the pigs, being the most intelligent, handled. Snowball and Napoleon continued to be in constant disagreement. Whatever proposal one made, the other would invariably oppose. If one suggested planting a certain crop, the other would advocate for a different one. Snowball, with his eloquence, often won the support of the majority at the Sunday meetings. He envisioned the construction of a windmill, believing it would electrify the farm, enabling them to operate machinery and reducing their workload significantly. Napoleon, however, argued that food production was more important and that the windmill project was a distraction. He insisted that if they focused on the windmill, they would starve. The farm was divided by this debate. Snowball drew elaborate plans for the windmill, showcasing its benefits to the other animals. Boxer, ever loyal and industrious, adopted the motto, "I will work harder," in support of the windmill, believing it would truly lighten everyone's burden. Napoleon, meanwhile, continued to quietly build his own power base among the sheep, who would often interrupt Snowball's speeches with their bleating of, "For legs good, 2 legs bad." The ultimate decision on the windmill was to be made by a vote at a Sunday meeting. When Snowball presented his passionate argument for the windmill, the animals were swayed. Just as the vote was about to take place, Napoleon emitted a strange, high-pitched whimper. Immediately, 9 enormous dogs, which no one had seen before, burst into the barn. They were the puppies Napoleon had taken away and secretly raised. The dogs charged at Snowball, pursuing him out of the barn and across the fields. Snowball fled desperately, narrowly escaping their jaws. The dogs then returned to Napoleon, wagging their tails. Napoleon, now clearly in control, announced that the Sunday meetings would cease. From now on, all decisions would be made by a special committee of pigs, presided over by himself. He argued that the debates were unproductive and that the animals lacked the intelligence to make sound decisions. The other animals were stunned and fearful. Squealer, with his persuasive rhetoric, explained that Napoleon was taking on a heavy burden for their own good. He claimed that Snowball was a dangerous criminal and that Napoleon had saved them from his harmful influence. He also twisted the truth about the windmill, claiming it was Napoleon's original idea and that Snowball had stolen it. Boxer, with his unwavering loyalty, fully accepted Napoleon's authority and adopted a new motto: Napoleon is always right. Napoleon abolished the Sunday assemblies, which had been the primary forum for animal participation in farm governance. All future decisions would be made by a special committee of pigs, with Napoleon himself presiding. He justified this by stating that the debates were a waste of time and that the other animals were too ignorant to make proper choices. The animals were shocked and apprehensive, but Squealer, using his rhetorical skill, managed to convince them that Napoleon was making a selfless sacrifice for their benefit. He characterized Snowball as a criminal who had secretly collaborated with Jones from the beginning, and asserted that the windmill idea had always been Napoleon's, stolen by Snowball. Boxer, with his absolute trust, accepted Napoleon's new leadership and adopted a second personal maxim: Napoleon is always right. The gun was no longer fired on the anniversary of the rebellion, only on the anniversary of the Battle of the Cowshed. Chapter 6. Throughout the ensuing year, the animals toiled like slaves. Yet, they were content in their labor, enduring every hardship, knowing that all their efforts were for their own benefit and for the good of future generations of animals, not for parasitic human beings. The farm's machinery and tools, designed for humans, continued to pose challenges, and the pigs had to devise clever solutions for every task. The initial plan was to purchase what they needed from outside, such as tools, paraffin oil, and nails. This would require money, which meant increasing the farm's output. The animals worked a 60-hour week, and in August, Napoleon announced that there would be voluntary work on Sunday afternoons. Any animal who did not participate would have their rations reduced. Even with this, the animals found joy in their work, especially in building the windmill. Boxer proved to be the most dedicated worker, often working extra hours alone, lifting and hauling heavy stones. The construction of the windmill presented immense difficulties. The stones for the walls had to be quarried, and then broken into manageable pieces, a task that required considerable strength. Boxer was indispensable, using his brute force to drag the largest boulders. The animals also had trouble with the tools, as they were not designed for their use. However, they persevered, motivated by Snowball's original vision and their belief in the project. Napoleon declared that the windmill would eventually be completed, but the initial progress was slow and arduous. After a few weeks, it became clear that some necessary items could not be produced on the farm. Napoleon announced that Animal Farm would begin trading with neighboring farms. The animals were greatly disturbed by this, remembering the initial resolution never to engage in trade with humans. Squealer, however, convinced them that no such resolution had ever been passed. He used his persuasive abilities to twist words and manipulate their memories, asserting that the idea of not trading with humans was a mere fabrication of Snowball's. He also announced that the pigs would begin sleeping in the farmhouse beds. This too caused unease among the animals, as it violated another of the 7 commandments. Squealer once again explained that the pigs needed a comfortable place to rest their brains, as they were the intellectual leaders of the farm. He claimed that a bed merely referred to a place to sleep, and that the prohibition was against sheets, which were a human invention. The animals were too bewildered and intimidated to argue. The fourth commandment, no animal shall sleep in a bed, was found to have been subtly altered to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. One stormy night in November, a gale swept across the farm, destroying the partially built windmill. The animals were devastated. Napoleon, however, immediately blamed Snowball, claiming he had sabotaged a windmill out of malice. He declared Snowball a traitor and an enemy of Animal Farm, offering a reward for his capture. The animals, though confused, accepted Napoleon's explanation. Napoleon then rallied them, declaring that they would rebuild the windmill, no matter the cost, and that they would work through the winter. This act of apparent betrayal by Snowball, as depicted by Napoleon, served to further solidify Napoleon's power and consolidate his authority. Chapter 7. The winter that followed was bitter and severe. Food was scarce, and the animals suffered from hunger and cold. The illusion of plenty was shattered by the harsh realities of farm life. The windmill, destroyed by the storm, seemed an impossible task to rebuild. Despite their hardships, the animals continued to toil tirelessly, driven by Boxer's unwavering determination and his motto, "I will work harder." They worked through blizzards and icy conditions, struggling to clear the wreckage and gather new stones. The outside world continued to spread rumors about Animal Farm's imminent collapse. Napoleon, however, was determined to present an image of prosperity to the outside world to avoid inciting further rebellions. He instructed the pigeons to spread tales of abundance and arranged for Mr. Whymper, the human solicitor who now acted as their intermediary, to convey a false impression of the farm's prosperity. He even filled the nearly empty food bins with sand and then covered them with grain to deceive Mr. Whymper during his visits. In January, the farm experienced a severe food shortage. Rations were drastically cut, but the pigs, ever resourceful, found ways to conceal the extent of their privations from the outside world. Napoleon rarely appeared in public, always accompanied by his pack of fierce dogs. He announced that the hens must surrender their egg for sale to buy food, a decision that caused a small rebellion among the hens. They protested by laying their eggs on the rafters, causing them to smash on the floor. Napoleon responded with brutal force, ordering the hens' rations to be cut off entirely, and any animal caught helping them would be punished with death. After 5 days, 9 hens died, and the others capitulated. Soon after, Napoleon began a series of purges. He convened an assembly in the yard and commanded his dogs to seize for pigs who had questioned his policies. These pigs, terrified, confessed to various fabricated crimes, including secret dealings with Snowball and Mr. Frederick, and plotting to overthrow Animal Farm. The dogs then tore out their throats, and they died. Following this, other animals were forced to confess to similar crimes, including sheep, hens, and geese. They admitted to having dreamed of Snowball, having eaten ears of corn without permission, or having urinated in the drinking pool. All those who confessed were immediately executed by Napoleon's dogs. The air was filled with the smell of blood. The remaining animals huddled together, terrified and bewildered. They could not understand why such horrors were happening. Boxer, deeply distressed, believed that the fault must lie with themselves and resolved to work harder. Clover, reflecting on the events, remembered old Major's vision of an animal society free from tyranny and fear. She led the animals in singing Beasts of England. But Squealer soon approached them and announced that the song was now forbidden. He explained that Beasts of England was a song of rebellion, and since the rebellion was over, there was no longer any need for it. He taught them a new song, a national anthem of Animal Farm, which spoke of their triumphs and loyalty to Napoleon. The animals were confused, but, as always, complied. Chapter 8. In the days that followed, the animals felt uneasy, but Squealer reassured them that the executions were necessary to root out traitors, and that Snowball had been a secret agent of Jones all along. The sixth commandment, no animal shall kill any other animal, was later discovered to have been altered to no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. The animals, though dimly remembering the original commandment, were unable to dispute Squealer's claims. Napoleon, now formally referred to as our leader, Comrade Napoleon, lived in even greater seclusion in the farmhouse, attended by his dogs and a new pig named Pinkai, who tasted all his food before he ate it to ensure it wasn't poisoned. Every success on the farm, from a good harvest to a successful birth, was attributed to Napoleon. A new poem in his honor was written on the barn wall, and a portrait of him was painted. The construction of the windmill resumed, and the animals worked tirelessly, driven by their fear of Napoleon and their unwavering belief in Boxer's motto. The timber from the farm, which had been set aside for sale, became a point of contention between Napoleon and Mr. Frederick and Mr. Pilkington. Both farmers were eager to purchase it, and Napoleon, with his characteristic cunning, played them against each other, negotiating terms that were most advantageous to Animal Farm. He continuously shifted his allegiance, first favoring Pilkington, then Frederick, spreading rumors and insults about the one he was not dealing with. This elaborate negotiation, however, concealed a deeper betrayal. Finally, Napoleon announced that he had sold the timber to Mr. Frederick. The animals were relieved, believing that the dangerous dealings were over. However, 3 days later, Mr. Frederick paid for the timber with forged banknotes. Napoleon, furious, declared that Mr. Frederick had swindled him and that Animal Farm was now at war with Pinchfield. Immediately after, Mr. Frederick and his men launched a brutal attack on Animal Farm. They were well armed, some carrying guns, and they quickly overwhelmed the animals. The animals fought bravely, but they were no match for the armed men. They managed to destroy the windmill, which they had toiled so hard to build, by blowing it up with explosives. The animals were heartbroken and demoralized by the destruction of their monument. Boxer, despite his wounds, rallied the animals and they launched a counterattack. The men, surprised by the animals' renewed courage, retreated. The Battle of the Windmill was a Pyrrhic victory for Animal Farm. They had driven off the humans, but their most significant achievement, the windmill, lay in ruins and many animals were wounded or dead. Squealer, however, declared it a glorious victory, praising Napoleon's leadership and minimizing the losses. The animals, though bewildered by the celebration, were too exhausted to question him. Shortly after, the pigs discovered a case of whiskey in the farmhouse cellar. A loud celebration ensued, and the animals heard sounds of singing and merriment from the farmhouse. The next morning, Squealer announced that Napoleon was gravely ill, suggesting he was dying. However, it soon became apparent that Napoleon was merely suffering from a severe hangover. A few days later, the animals noticed that the fifth commandment, "No animal shall drink alcohol," had been altered to "No animal shall drink alcohol to excess." Chapter 9. Boxer's split hoof took a long time to heal, but he refused to rest, insisting on continuing his arduous work. The animals faced another harsh winter. Food rations were again reduced for everyone except the pigs and dogs. Squealer, ever the propagandist, produced statistics to prove that despite appearances, the animals were actually better off than in Jones's time. He explained that a readjustment of rations was taking place, which was preferable to a reduction. He also announced that a new rule would be implemented. When a pig and a regular animal passed each other on the path, the regular animal had to step aside. Also, pigs were now allowed to wear green ribbons on their tails on Sundays. The farm was declared a republic, and a president was to be elected. Naturally, Napoleon was the sole candidate and was elected unanimously. Life became increasingly difficult for the common animals. They worked longer hours, received less food, and suffered from cold and hunger. However, they were constantly reminded of their freedom from human tyranny and the glorious future that awaited them. More and more celebrations, demonstrations, and speeches were organized by the pigs, serving to distract the animals from their hardship and reinforce their loyalty to Napoleon. The pigs continued to consume more, and it was revealed that they were even brewing beer for themselves in the scullery. One day, Boxer, while hauling a load of stones from the quarry, collapsed. He had overexerted himself and was severely injured. The animals were deeply concerned for him. Squealer arrived and announced that Napoleon had made arrangements for Boxer to be taken to a hospital in Willingdon for treatment. The animals were relieved, believing that Boxer would receive the best possible care. However, Benjamin the cynical donkey, observed the van that came to take Boxer away. He began to bray frantically, urging the other animals to read the side of the van. To their horror, they saw that it was a knacker's van belonging to a slaughterhouse. Boxer was not being taken to a hospital, but to be killed for glue and meat. The animals were devastated and tried desperately to stop the van, but it was too late. Boxer was driven away, never to be seen again. A few days later, Squealer delivered a moving speech, claiming to have been present at Boxer's bedside during his final moments. He twisted the truth, stating that Boxer had died peacefully in the hospital, uttering his final words of loyalty to Napoleon and Animal Farm. Squealer also claimed that the knacker's van had been recently purchased by the veterinary surgeon and had not yet had its previous owner's sign repainted. The animals, though saddened, were once again swayed by Squealer's persuasive lies. The money received from Boxer's sale was used by the pigs to purchase a case of whiskey, which they consumed at a celebratory banquet that evening. Chapter 10. Years passed. Generations of animals came and went. The windmill was finally completed, but it was not used to generate electricity or lighten the animals' workload. Instead, it was used to mill corn, which brought in substantial profits for the pigs. The farm was prosperous, but only the pigs and dogs seemed to benefit. The common animals worked as hard as ever, with little to show for it. They were told that the farm's increasing wealth was for their benefit, and that someday they would enjoy the fruits of their labor, but that day never seemed to arrive. The original ideals of the rebellion, equality, freedom, and animal comradeship, had long been forgotten or distorted. The number of animals on the farm remained roughly the same, but the pigs grew more numerous. The pigs, now walking on two legs, began to carry whips and wear clothes. They even acquired a telephone and subscribed to newspapers. The original 7 commandments painted on the barn wall had been gradually changed over the years by Squealer to suit the pig's agenda, until only one remained. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This statement epitomized a complete inversion of the rebellion's initial principles. One day, a deputation of human farmers was invited to tour Animal Farm. Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood and other prominent farmers came to admire the farm's efficiency and the pigs' management. They were particularly impressed by the animals' willingness to work hard on meager rations, a testament to the pigs' exploitation. During the visit, a banquet was held in the farmhouse. The animals, peering through the farmhouse window, witnessed the pigs and humans sitting together, playing cards and drinking. There was no longer any distinction between them. Mr. Pilkington congratulated Napoleon on the admirable way he managed the farm and the diligence of the animals. He remarked that he had always believed in stricter discipline for animals, and that Animal Farm served as an excellent example to other farmers. Napoleon, in return, announced that Animal Farm would revert to its original name, Manor Farm, as it was its proper and historical designation. He also stated that certain practices, such as the animals calling each other comrade and saluting the flag, would be abolished, as they suggested a revolutionary spirit that was now unnecessary. He assured the human farmers that there was no longer any cause for alarm regarding the relations between humans and animals. As the evening progressed, a loud argument erupted from the farmhouse. The animals rushed to the window again. Napoleon and Mr. Pilkington had both played an ace of spades simultaneously, leading to a furious quarrel. The animals looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and then back from pig to man again. But it was no longer possible to distinguish between them. The faces of the pigs had become indistinguishable from the faces of the men. The revolution had come full circle, leaving the animals under a tyranny that was, in essence, no different from the one they had overthrown.